Erev Tov, everyone, and welcome to the House of Seven Beggars. It is Tuesday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the East Coast of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is, of course, the House of Seven Beggars. Therefore, this must be the Shul Study Hall. Okay, so, we got a few people in the chat room. Let's see. Daniel, and I'm assuming Brooke, Yair, Miriam, and John D. Good to have you all with us. I'm sure we'll have some other people joining us eventually. Arriving fashionably late, of course. We're going to continue our study of the Talmud, and we will be on... let's see, we are on page 425. And we will be doing Mishna Megillat Hallah, chapter 4. And just a little housekeeping, just a little housekeeping before we continue, because next week is Purim. We will not have a... study session for either the Shul Study Hall or the Shul Torah Study next week, as we will be doing, we will be doing the Megillah reading for Purim, and having our whatever we come up with for our Purim spiel. Still working on it, still haven't figured it out, but we'll come up with something. Anyway, so there will be no study next week, no regular study, but again, we will still be broadcasting the Megillat reading in the evening and again in the morning. So please join us for that. Okay, so let us continue on with the Talmud. And since we are studying the Talmud, and the blessing for the study of Talmud is the same as the blessing for the study of Torah, because it is comprised mainly of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay. Mishnah 1. If two women made separate doughs. Remember last week we were talking all about the doughs and the Hallah and all that and stuff. So we continue on in the same vein. Okay, so if two women made separate doughs from two separate cobs, and the doughs touched one another, then even if they are of one species, they are exempt from Hallah. But if they belong to one woman, then if it be a case of one species with its like species, they are subject to Hallah. But with an unlike species, they are exempt. Mishnah 2. What is it that constitutes the category of a species with its like species? Wheat is not reckoned together with any species other than with spelt. Barley is reckoned together with all species except wheat. Rabbi Johanan ben Nuri said, the rest of the species are reckoned together one with another. Mishnah 3. If there are two doughs from two separate cobs, and dough from a cob of rice or from a cob of terumah lying between, they are not reckoned together. If there was a thing, vis-a-vis dough, from which Hallah had been taken, lying between them, they are reckoned together, since it had already once been subject to Hallah. Mishnah 4. If dough from a cob of new corn and dough from a cob of old corn stuck one with another, Rabbi Ishmael said, let him take Hallah from the middle. But the sages prohibit. If one has taken Hallah from dough made out of one cob, Rabbi Akiva says it is Hallah. But the sages say it is not Hallah. Mishnah 5. If one has two separate cobs of dough, from one of which Hallah had been taken separately, and from the other two separately, and he went back to them and made of them one dough, Rabbi Akiva declares it exempt, but the sages declare it liable. Thus it is found that the very proportion giving rise to the stringency of the one ruling is the proposition that gives rise to the leniency of another ruling. Okay, I'm sure that was perfectly clear, right? Mishnah 6. A man may take the requisite amount of Hallah out of a clean dough from which Hallah has not previously been taken, his purpose being to effect it in cleanness, by way of going on separating Hallah therefrom in respect of unclean demeh until it putrefies. Oh, that's pleasant. Since Hallah in respect of demeh may be taken from clean dough, in respect of unclean dough, and from one dough in respect of another dough, which is not close together. If Israelites were tenants of Gentiles in Syria, Rabbi Eliezer declares their produce subject to tithes and to the law of the seventh year, the Shemitah. But Rabban Gamaliel declares it exempt. Rabban Gamaliel says one is to give 2 Hallah portions in Syria. But Rabbi Eliezer says only 1 Hallah portion. They adopt the lenient ruling of Rabban Gamaliel and the lenient ruling of Rabbi Eliezer. Eventually, they went back on this practice and instituted the practice in accordance with Rabban Gamaliel in both respects. Mishnah 8. Rabban Gamaliel says, there are 3 territorial divisions with regard to liability to Hallah, from the land of Yisrael to Kezib, 1 Hallah portion, from Kezib to Amanah, 2 Hallah portions, 1 for the fire, 1 for the priest. To the 1 for the fire, the rule of the statutory proportion applies. To the 1 for the priest, the rule of the statutory proportion does not apply. From the river to Amanah, and the zone inward 2 Hallah portions, one for the fire and one for the priest. To the one intended for the fire, the rule is the statutory proportion does not apply. To the one intended for the priest, the rule of the statutory proportion applies. And a priest who has immersed himself during the day and has to wait till sunset for his purification to be complete may eat it. Rabbi Jose says one does not require immersion. It is forbidden as food to men who have an issue, to women who have an issue, to women during menstruation, to women after childbirth, but may be eaten with a stranger at the same table, and may be given to any priest. Mishna 9. These two may be given to any priest. Devoted things, firstlings, the lamb substitute as ransom for the firstling of an ass, the shoulder, the 2 cheeks and the maw, the first of the fleece, oil fit only for burning, consecrated food ordained to be consumed within the precincts of the sanctuary, and the first ripe fruits. Rabbi Judah prohibits in the case of first ripe fruits. As for horse beans, set aside for terumah, Rabbi Akiva permits, but the sages prohibit. Mishnah 10. Nitei, a man of Ketoah, brought Hallah portions from Be Jatir, but they did not accept these from him. The men of Alexandria brought their Hallah portions from Alexandria, but they did not accept these from them. The men of Mount Zeboim brought their first ripe fruits prior to the festival, but they did not accept these from them, on account of that which is written in the law, and the feast of the harvest, the first fruits of thy labors which thou sowest in the field. Okay, so let's take a look here. A lot of notes on this one. Okay, so according to this verse, it was the first fruits coming from that which thou sowest in the field, i.e., the 2 loaves, which too were termed first fruits, that were the first to be brought to the temple before the other first ripe produce, indeed before any of the other priestly and Levitical dues. Seemingly, the refusal recorded here is contrary to Mishna, which lays it down as that although the first fruits are in the first instance not to be brought before the 2 loaves, nevertheless, if one had already unintentionally done so, since first fruits are valid, they are not accepted at the time, but laid aside till after the bringing of the 2 loaves on the day of the festival, and then they are handed to the priest, and the declaration prescribed in Deuteronomy 26 is recited. However, JT, explained that the refusal of the of the prematurely brought first fruits, in our case, was on the grounds that acceptance would, in the circumstances, have given the impression that it was a proper thing to bring first fruits prior to the Feast of Weeks. Okay, that makes sense. Mishnah 11. Ben Antigonus brought up firstlings from Babylon, but they did not accept these from him. Yosef the priest brought first ripe fruits in the form of wine and oil, but they did not accept these from him. He also brought up his sons and members of his household to celebrate the lesser Passover in Jerusalem, but they turned him back, so that the thing should not become firmly fixed as an obligation. Ariston brought his first ripe fruits from Apamea, and they accepted these from him because they said, "One who owns land in Syria is as one who owns land in the outskirts of Jerusalem." Interesting. Okay, so, and the produce of such Jewish-owned land in Syria, accordingly subject to tithes. This is not the case of the land in Syria. It is held by Jews only in tenancy. For a list of particulars in which Syria is treated in law like the land of Israel, MSM adds the following passage from one of the Baraita. 24 dues were given to the priests, 10 in the temple and 4 in Jerusalem, and 10 within the borders of the land of Israel. These are the 10 given them in the temple: sin offerings of birds, the unconditional and suspensive guilt offerings, the peace offerings of the congregation, the log of oil of the leper, the remainder of the omer, the 2 loaves, the showbread, the residual of the meal offering, and these are the 4 given in Jerusalem: the firstling, the first fruits, the heave offering from the thanks offering, and the ram of the Nazarite, and the skins of hollow sacrifices. And these are the 10 given them within the borders: terumah of the tithe, Hallah, the first of the shearing, the priestly gifts from every beast slaughtered for food, the redemption price of the firstborn son, the redemption price of the firstling of an ass, the field of possession, the devoted field, and what was wrongly obtained of a proselyte who died without any legal issue. In other words, a will. No priest who is not well versed in these things may receive them as gifts. Okay, we are moving on now. Mishna, we are on page 432. Mishna Begillat Bikurim, chapter 1. Mishnah 1. Some of these who bring Bikurim and recite the declaration, others who may only bring them but do not make recital, and some there and some there are who may not even bring them at all. These may not bring them. He who plants a tree on his own soil, but sinks a sooth, or a shoot, sooth? A shoot, so that it grows in the territory belonging to an individual or to the public. And likewise, if one sinks a shoot in another's private property or in public property, so that it grows on his own property, or if one plants a tree on his own property and sinks it so that it still grows on his own property, but there is a private or public road between, such a one may not bring bikurim. Rabbi Judah says such a one has to bring bikurim. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Okay, so we're just starting Bikurim, which is the last of the order of Zeraim, which is seeds. Okay, so Bikurim, first fruits. This is the 11th of the tractate of Zeraim, or seeds, of the Mishna and of the Talmud. All versions of the Mishna contain the first 3 chapters, and some contain a 4th. We'll see which one this one has. The 3 chapters found in all versions primarily discuss the commandment found in Deuteronomy 26, verses 1 through 11, to bring the Bikurim, first fruits, to the temple in Jerusalem, and to make a declaration upon bringing it. As is common in the Mishnah, related matters are also discussed. And we've talked about this whole thing about these public declarations that have to be made. Okay, so that, when somebody is going to do something or put aside something or give something or whatever it is, there is a formula that has to be followed. Same thing when a person brings a sacrifice, or in this case brings bikurim, they also have to make, it's a public declaration. So it becomes a legal thing. It's a legal declaration that they're actually making. So let us go back here and get back to the Talmud. If I can get it to come up here, come on. Come on, I know you're there somewhere. Okay. Okay, so Mishnah 2. For what reason may he not bring them? Because it is said, the first fruits of thy land, meaning that thou mayest not bring them unless all the produce comes from thy land. Tenants, lessees, or occupiers of confiscated property, or a robber may not bring them for the same reason, because it says the first fruit of thy land, not somebody else's, my land. Okay. Bikurim, Mishnah 3. Bikurim are brought only from the 7 kinds, the 7 species found in Israel. But none may be brought from dates grown on hills, or from valley fruits, or from olives that are not of the choice kind. Bikurim are not to be brought before Pentecost. The men of Mount Zeboim brought their Bikurim before Pentecost. But they were not accepted because of that. It was written in the Torah, and the feast of harvest and the first fruits of thy labors which thou sowest in the field. Okay. Okay, so let's see. As we're at the closing festival, Pentecost, Shavuot, being the closing festival to Pesach. On this festival, 2 wheaten loaves of new corn were offered in the temple, and these sanction the use of new produce in the temple. Okay. Mishna 4. These bring Bikurim, but do not make the recital, the declaration, the public statement. The proselyte, since he cannot say, which the Lord hath sworn to our fathers to give to us. In other words, they have no tribe. They have no inheritance in the land. And again, the land belongs to God, okay? But he allocates it to the tribes, and since they are not of a specific particular tribe, then he cannot actually say that the land, which, it's not my land, number one. The other one is that, his father was not a Hebrew. So he can't make the statement about that the Lord hath sworn to our fathers to give to us. If his mother was an Israelite, then he both brings Bikurim and recites the declaration. The matrilineal descent, we see for the first time where it's actually addressed in the Talmud that, okay, if his mother, though, was an Israelite, then he is obliged. He is considered part of the Jewish people. Okay, he may not, because tribe comes from the father, heritage comes from the mother, tribe comes from the father. Okay, so as for the father, he really has no inheritance in the land, no portion of the land from a tribe. Okay, because he doesn't actually have a tribe. But if he has a Jewish mother, then he is still actually part of the Jewish people. So he does get to make the declaration. When he prays privately, he shall say, O God of the fathers of Israel. But when he is in the synagogue, he should say, the God of your fathers. But if his mother was an Israelite woman, he says, the God of our fathers. Okay, so Miriam says, even as a ben Avraham. Yes, even as a ben Avraham. Now that will not always be the case. After Mashiach comes, we have the promise that even the proselyte will have his share in the land. Okay, so I mean, this is not this is a current thing, but it is not something that is going to be like that forever. At the time of Mashiach, things are going to change. Just as we know that during the time of Mashiach, that most of the festivals will no longer be celebrated. The fast days and all those other things are going to go away. We will only have a few, because every day will be a festival day. Okay, well, at least that's what I feel. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about the Bikurim, and we were talking about mothers and fathers and so. Okay, so we're on Mishnah 5. Mishnah 5, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, a woman who is a daughter of a proselyte may not marry a priest unless her mother was herself an Israelite woman. This law applies equally to the offspring, whether of proselyte or freed slaves, even to 10 generations, unless their mother is an Israelite, a guardian, an agent, a slave, a woman, one of doubtful sex, or a hermaphrodite. Bring the Bikurim, but do not recite, since they cannot say, which thou, O God, hast given unto me. Okay, so that begs to be explored just a bit here. Let's get down here to 21. Because the land was not divided among women, implies that only men, i.e., such whose sex was not the subject of doubt, were the inheritors. Okay? Again, the tribe comes from the father. Okay, where was I? We're now up here at 5, 6. Okay. He who buys 2 trees that had grown in property belonging to his fellow brings Bikurim, but is not to make the recital. Rabbi Meir says he also makes the recital. If the well dried up or the tree was cut down, he brings but does not recite. Rabbi Judah says he brings and recites. From Pentecost until Sukkot, one may bring Bikurim and make the recital. From Sukkot until Hanukkah, one may bring but does not make the recital. Rabbi Judah ben Batariah says one may bring and also make the recital. Mishnah 7. If a man set aside his Bikurim and sold afterwards his field, he brings them but does not make the recital. And people wonder why, the people that, what I do in my professional life and stuff, which is I deal with standards, international, national standards, legal requirements, and stuff like that. And people have always wondered why, how I ended up being so good at what I do, about interpreting what these standards, the intent of these standards, and what the standard allows you to do and what the standard does not allow you to do. And I've actually made the statement to a number of people, my business partners, of course, and stuff like that. It's because of studying Talmud. I got this good in my professional life because I studied the Talmud. Because of all the intricacies in the Talmud and this has to be this way, but it doesn't have to be this way. And the rabbi says this is acceptable, but then this rabbi says this is not acceptable, and it's because of this and that and the other thing. So it's been the study of Talmud, and they say, what good is the study of Talmud? What can you learn from the study of Talmud? Study the Talmud. You would be surprised at how many times it will serve you very well. It makes your mind sharp. It gives you, it allows you to see subtleties and gray areas, because we love gray areas. Not just in the Talmud, but we love gray areas in my business because not clear, then you have to interpret it to the benefit of the person who's making the statement. So again, that's what value is there in there? There is a tremendous amount of value in it. It has gotten me, Baruch Hashem, it has gotten me to where I am today by studying this stuff. Okay, so with that said, I've had my little pat myself on the back here a little bit. Okay, let's see. Mishna 7. If a man set aside his bikurim and sold afterwards his field, he brings them but does not make the recital. He doesn't own the land anymore, right? Whereas the other who bought the field may not bring bikurim of the same species, but he brings them, because it's already been brought, right? But he brings them of another kind and makes the recital. Rabbi Judah says he may also bring first fruits of the same kind and make the recital. The justification for that for Rabbi Judah would be, he now owns the land. He now owns the land. The produce is there. It is still first fruits for him. It's like buying a used car, right? May not be brand new, but hey, it's new to me. Okay, so I would have to go with Rabbi Judah on this one and say that, this makes sense. He now owns the land. He now owns the produce in the land, so therefore he is obligated to bring the first fruits. And if he brings the first fruits, he can actually make the declaration because it's actually his land now. Okay. Mishnah 8. If one set aside his bikurim and they were plundered, oh my goodness, or rotted, were stolen or lost, or contracted uncleanness, he must bring others in their stead, but does not make the recital. Okay, because these were not actually the first fruits, they are substitutes. These others are not subject to the law of the added fifth. Okay, so if you would actually use something intentionally, you goofed up, made a mistake, whatever, okay, through your own fault, you did this. Okay, and you have to substitute it for something else. You have to add a fifth to it. Okay, but in this case, it's not of any, it's not anything that this person did. It's not by their own hand that these things actually happen. These are things that just happen to happen. They were plundered. Somebody took them, or they rotted for some reason. They were stolen or lost or contracted an uncleanness. Okay, so he doesn't have to add the fifth to it because he didn't do anything by his own hand to cause this to happen. If they contracted uncleanness while in the temple court, he must scatter them and does not make the recital. Whence do we infer that a man is responsible for them until he brings them into the temple mount? Because it says, the first of the first fruits of thy land shalt thou bring into the house of the Lord thy God. This teaches that he is responsible until he brings them into the temple mount. If he bought bikurim of one kind and made the recital, and then bought of another kind, he makes no second recital. Mishna 10. These bring and make the recital. One who brings bikurim from Pentecost to Sukkot, of course. fruits of the 7 species. Of course, we know this. And those grown on the mountains, or dates grown in the valley. Of course, we know just the opposite from earlier. It said that the dates grown on the dates grown on the mountain, or the vegetables grown in the valleys couldn't be brought. Olive oil, olives, the produce from Transjordania. Rabbi Jose the Galilean says one may not bring bikurim from Transjordania, since that is not a land flowing with milk and honey. Still isn't today. Mishna 11. If one bought 3 trees in a field of his fellow, he brings bikurim and makes the recital. They're his trees. Rabbi Meir says even if he brought only 2, if he bought 1 tree with its soil, okay? Here we go into the subtleties of the law. Okay? Not just the tree. You didn't buy just the tree, but you bought the soil that it was in. Okay? And we talked about this whole idea of, the root system and stuff like that. However big the crown was going to be the size of the root ball, and so on. Okay, you remember this. I think it was Shlomo that backed me up on it. Okay. So, if he bought 1 tree with its soil, he brings bikurim and makes the recital. Rabbi Judah says also tenants and lessees bring and recite. Obviously, Rabbi Judah feels that if a person is a tenant or a lessee, that they are temporarily owners of the land. They own this for all intents and purposes until the 7th year or the Jubilee year or whatever. Okay, we are on page 435, and we are on Megillat Bikurim chapter 2. Okay, so Mishnah 1. For terumah and bikurim, one is liable to death, and the additional 5th. And when we talk about liable to death, again, we're talking about they are liable to a heavenly death, which means that they will perish before their time. And they are forbidden to non-priests and accounted as the property of the priest. They are neutralized in 101 parts, require the washing of hands, and awaiting until sunset. These laws apply only to terumah and bikurim, which is not so in the case of tithe. Mishnah 2. There are laws which apply to second tithe and bikurim, but not to terumah. For second tithe and bikurim require to be brought to the appointed place. They require confession and are forbidden to an onen. That is a person who is had a loved one who has just passed away. But Rabbi Shimon permits bikurim to an onen, and they are subject to the law of removal. But Rabbi Shimon exempts bikurim from removal, and the slightest admixture of them with common produce of a like kind, and we talked about this whole thing about, like kinds, renders it forbidden to be consumed as common food in Jerusalem. And so it is what grows from them and so is what is grown from them forbidden to be consumed in Jerusalem, even by non-priests or by cattle. But Rabbi Shimon permits them. These are the laws which apply to second tithe and bikurim, which is not the case with terumah. Okay, Mishna 3. I think we're going to just go a little bit further, and then we'll go ahead and we'll take our little break here. Mishna 3. There are laws which apply to terumah and tithe, but not to bikurim. Terumah and the second tithe render forbidden the contents of the threshing floor, and have their quantity prescribed, and apply to all produce during both during and after temple times, and to produce grown by tenants, lessees, holders of confiscated property, and robbers. These are the laws which apply to terumah and tithe, which is not the case with bikurim. Mishna 4. And there are laws applying to bikurim which do not apply to terumah and tithe, for bikurim can become acquired while still attached to the soil, which we just read about. And a man may make his entire field as bikurim. He is responsible for them, and they require an offering, singing, waving, and the passing of the night in Jerusalem. Mishna 5. The terumah of the tithe is like to bikurim in 2 instances, and like to terumah in 2 others. It may be taken from clean produce for that which is unclean, and from such produce that is not in close proximity like bikurim. And it renders the contents of the threshing floor forbidden, and has a prescribed amount like terumah. Mishna 6. The etrog is in 3 things like to an ordinary tree, and in 1 thing like to a vegetable. It is like to a tree in respect of Orlah, 4th year plantings, and the law of the 7th year, and like to a vegetable in 1 thing, in that its tithing season commences with the season of its gathering. So, Rabbi Gamaliel, but Rabbi Eliezer says the citron is like a tree in all things. Mishna 7. The blood of human beings is like to the blood of animals, in that it renders seed susceptible to Levitical impurity, and like to the blood of a reptile, no culpability is incurred on account thereof. Okay, so we're going to pause there. We're going to pick back up. We will be on page 436 when we return. And we'll take a little break, have a little moment to take care of some business, have a little nosh, and we will return. Let me get everything prepped here so that we can get everything going at the same time here. Okay, so let's see if this is all going to work together.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. Thank everybody for sticking around. Let me get my mic adjusted. Doesn't want to seem to stay in one place. Okay. Well, thank everybody for sticking around. Daniel, Yair, and happy anniversary, Yair, last week. Miriam, John, D, Shlomo, and those of you who might be watching in the background. Yeah, there's a couple of you watching in the background. I see you. Jump into the chat room. There's a good group of people in here. So, okay. So, let's move back on and see how far we get. Oops. I'm glad I highlight those things. This thing is really touchy on the mouse tonight for some reason. Okay, we're in Mishna 8. Okay, so a koi is in some ways like to a beast of chase. Okay, well, let's see what they're talking about, a koi here. Now, this is, okay. A kind of bearded deer or antelope. The Talmud is undecided whether it belongs to the genus of cattle or beasts of chase. Interesting. The koi. So obviously we're not talking about a fish. Okay, so in some ways, it is more like to cattle. And again, in some ways, it is like to both of beasts of chase and cattle, and in some things is neither like to a beast or of chase or nor cattle. Okay, so I'm glad we got that straightened out. Okay, Mishna 9. Wherein is it like to a beast of chase? Its blood must be covered like the blood of a beast of chase. It may not be slaughtered on a festival. If it is slaughtered, its blood is not to be covered. Its fat conveys carrion uncleanness, like a beast of chase, but its uncleanness is also a matter of doubt, nor can one redeem it with the firstborn of an ass. Okay, Mishna 10. And wherein does it resemble cattle? Its fat is prohibited like the fat of cattle, but one does not incur on account thereof the penalty of karet. It may not be brought with the redemption money of the second tithe to be eaten in Yerushalayim. It is subject to the priest's due of the shoulder, the two cheeks, and the maw. Rabbi Eliezer exempts it from these dues because upon him who wishes to exact aught of his neighbor is it devolves to bring proof of his claim. Mishnah 11. And wherein is it neither like cattle nor beast of chase? It is forbidden on account of the law of Kilayim to yoke it with either a beast of chase or cattle. And if one assigned to his son his beast of chase and his cattle, he has not thereby assigned the coy. If one says, I will become a Nazirite, if this is a beast of chase or if this is a cattle, he becomes a Nazirite. In all other ways, it is like both animals of chase and cattle. It requires slaughtering like them both. It can convey carrion uncleanness, and to it applies the law relating to the limb of a living being, like to them both. Okay. Moving right along here. Chapter 3. Mishnah 1. How were the Bikurim set aside? A man goes down into his field. He sees a fig that ripened, or a cluster of grapes that ripened, or a pomegranate that ripened. He ties a reed rope around it and says, let this be Bikurim. Rabbi Shimon says, notwithstanding that he must again designate them as Bikurim after they have been plucked from the soil. So he actually has to declare it twice. Oh, wind is really picking up out there. Boy, I can really hear it banging stuff around. Okay. Mishnah 2. How were the Bikurim taken up to Yerushalayim? All the inhabitants of the cities that constituted the Ma'amad assembled in the city of the Ma'amad and spent the night in the open place thereof without entering any of the houses. Early in the morning, the officer said, let us arise and go up to Zion, into the house of the Lord our God. Mishnah 3. Those who lived near brought fresh figs and grapes, but those from a distance brought dried figs and raisins. An ox with horns bedecked with gold and with an olive crown on its head led the way. The flute was played before them until they were nigh to Yerushalayim. And when they arrived close to Yerushalayim, they sent messengers in advance and ornamentally arrayed their Bikurim. The governors and chiefs and treasurers of the temple went out to meet them, according to the rank of the entrance used. They go forth. All the skilled artisans of Yerushalayim would stand up before them and greet them. Brethren, men of such a place, we are delighted to welcome you. How about that, boy? Talking about, coming from a ways away and having a, the group of citizens coming and having such a welcome once they arrive in Yerushalayim. That's fantastic, isn't it? Okay. Mishnah 4. The flute was playing before them till they reached the Temple Mount. And when they reached the Temple Mount, even King Agrippa would take the basket and place it on his shoulder and walk as far as the temple court. At the approach to the court, the Levites would sing the song, I will extol thee, O Lord, for thou hast raised me up, and hast not suffered mine enemies to rejoice over me. Well, this is a big deal. Mishna 5, the turtle doves tied to the basket were offered up as burnt offerings, but that which they held in their hands they presented to the priests. Mishna 6, while the basket was yet on his shoulder, the king, he would recite from, I profess this day unto the Lord thy God, until the completion of the passage. Rabbi Judah said, till he had reached, a wandering Aramean was my father. Since we are coming up close to Pesach, having reached these words, he took the basket off his shoulder and held it by its edge, and the priest placed his hand beneath it and waved it. He then recited from a wandering Aramean was my father until he completed the entire passage. He would then deposit the basket by the side of the altar, prostrate himself, and depart. Mishna 7. Originally, all who knew how to recite would recite, whilst those unable to do so would repeat it. But when they refrained from bringing, it was decided that both those who could and those who could not recite should repeat the words. Mishna 8. The rich brought their bikurim in baskets overlaid with silver or gold, whilst the poor used wicker baskets of peeled willow branches, and they used to give both the baskets and the bikurim to the priests. Rabbi Shimon ben Nanos said, the bikurim may be bedecked with produce other than the 7 species. But Rabbi Akiva says they could only be bedecked with produce of the 7 kinds. Mishna 10. Rabbi Shimon says there are 3 elements in bikurim. The bikurim, the additions to the bikurim, and the ornamentations of the bikurim. The additions to the bikurim had to be of a like kind, but the ornamental fruit of the bikurim could also be of another kind. The additions to the bikurim could only be eaten in Levitical purity, and were exempt from the law of Demei. But the fruit used for ornamentation of the bikurim were subject to the law of Demei. Mishna 11. When did the sages, and if you're wondering why I'm moving along at such a quick pace, I want to finish this order of the Talmud. I want us to go into Purim knowing we have completed the first order of the Talmud. Okay, so if we run a little bit over, we're going to run a little bit over, but we're going to marshal on. We are going to finish the first order. Okay, so when did the sages deem the additions to the bikurim in the same rank as the bikurim themselves? When they come from the land of Yisrael. But if they do not come from the land, they were not to be regarded as the bikurim themselves. Mishna 12. In what respect did they rule that the bikurim were the exclusive property of the priest, in that he can purchase therewith slaves and immovable property and unclean cattle, and a creditor of his may take them for his debt, and his wife for her ketubah, as may be done also with a scroll of the law. Interesting. Rabbi Judah says the Bikurim may only be given only to a priest that is an associate, and as a favor. And the sages say they are given to men of the Mishmar. And they, boy, that is really, I mean, it goes from all caps to M1 LSHMAR. Okay, and they divided, yeah, there's some errors. You're going to find some errors in here. And they divided them among themselves as they do with all other consecrated objects. Mishna, Bikurim, chapter 4, Megillat, Bikurim, chapter 4. Mishnah 1. The hermaphrodite is in some things like to men and in other things like to women. In other things, again, he is like to men and to women, and in other things like neither men nor women. Mishnah 2. Wherein is he like to men? He contaminates with the seminal flux like men, and he dresses like men. He can take a wife, but not be taken as a wife like men. At his birth, his mother must count the blood of purification like men, and he must not be alone in the company of women like men. He is not maintained with the daughters like men, and may not transgress the law of ye shall not round, and thou shalt not defile for the day. Round off the corners of the beard and the hair. And he shall not defile for the dead like men. And he must perform all the commandments of the Torah like men. So in other words, the hermaphrodite is treated exactly like a man. Mishnah 3. And wherein is he like women? In that he contaminates with his menstrual flow like women. And he must not be alone in the company of men like women. And does not share the inheritance like the sons, with the sons like women. He cannot eat of most holy sacrifices like women. At his birth, his mother remains unclean on account of the blood of her impurity, and like women too, he is disqualified from acting as a witness. If he had become the victim of illicit intercourse, he is disqualified from partaking of terumah like women. Mishnah 4. Wherein is he compared to both men and women? Guilt is incurred for smiling or cursing him, as in the case of men and women. And he who unwittingly slays him must go into exile. And if he if of set purpose, then the slayer receives the death penalty. His mother must, at his birth, bring an offering as for men and women, and like men and women, he may partake of the sacred gifts of the border, and may inherit any inheritance like men and women. Mishnah 5. And wherein is he likened neither to men nor woman? Because of his unclean issue, terumah is not to be burnt, neither is any penalty incurred by him on entering the temple in an unclean state. He must not be sold as a Hebrew slave, unlike men or women, and he cannot be evaluated unlike men or women. If one says, I will become a Nazirite, If he is neither a man nor a woman, then he becomes a Nazirite. Rabbi Jose says the hermaphrodite is a creature by itself, and the sages could not decide about him. But this is not so with one of doubtful sex. For such a one is at times a man, and at others a woman. Okay. So, that concludes Zerim. And that is where we are going. We are going to stop here until after Purim, when we will pick up here. And again, don't forget that next week there will be no class, but we will have the reading of the Megillat. And of course, we will probably, we'll probably have Zeta help out. We'll see what we can throw together for a little Purim spiel, and we'll see what happens. I always seem to be able to pull something together at the last minute, whether it's a magic trick or something like that. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to say that. Okay, we have concluded Zeraim, seeds. We have concluded the first of the 6 orders of the Mishna. Whenever we do, it's a time of great rejoicing. And of course, it's a great time because of where we are right now. I mean, this is the excuse me, this is the month of Adar, when we are supposed to increase in joy. And what better way to increase in joy than to celebrate, the completion of the first order of the Mishnah. So next week, or not next week, but the following week, we will start out with the second order of the Mishnah, which is Moed, festivals. And we will start with the tractate Shabbat. So, we'll get into these. These are very, very interesting. The whole thing is interesting, but these are the festivals I think you'll find most interesting, because these are all festivals that we know, we recognize, and we're going to find out some of the things, why we do some of the things that we do during these festivals. So, I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. Hope you will return to be with us next week for the reading of the Megillat, and the week after for the when we go back to our studies and stuff like that. And again, when you get done, when you get off the broadcast, go and celebrate. This is a big deal. This is something huge. Not many people do this anymore. Not many people study the Talmud and stuff. So we have just completed, and there is blessings. There are this is important. This is very important stuff. So again, when you get off, have a nosh, something special. Have maybe a little kiddush, something like that, and enjoy that we have finished the first order, the first order of the Mishnah. Okay, so until next time, if I can figure out which one I'm actually using here, we will say Laila Tov, and hope to see you on Purim.